because the mainstream media let you down. Turn down the noise because Blackballed starts now.
In a already tumultuous year, Justin Trudeau may have just had his worst day as Prime Minister of Canada. And we are going to talk about that and what Chrystia Freeland did, and if it's even ethical to light the house on fire before you leave. And so welcome to Blackballed, everybody. My name is James DeFiore, and today we have a guest who I can still see him. He's getting abused by conservative journalists on a daily basis, and it's happening again now. I don't want to bring that up for him, but I find it hilarious because he's good at his job, and we're always happy to have him. And his name is Max Fawcett. Max, how are you, buddy?
I'm great, James. How are you?
I'm doing well. Do you ever get tired of it, or is it kind of fun? Is it like a sport? When
Well, who's abusing me today? I need names.
Actually, it wasn't a journalist. It was Jackie Delaney.
Oh God, I think
Yeah.
I have her. I think I have her muted. I mean, look, it's
I
par for the
like her
course.
actually. We have lunch sometimes. Like
Yeah.
I find her to be nice. It's so funny how like, and we'll get onto the stuff with meat on it in a second, but it's just really interesting how people's online personalities are often not anything like what they're like in person.
Oh,
And so
I,
hold on to hope, everybody,
we're
because
we're we're
Mhm.
all the worst versions of ourselves on social media and on Twitter. And I've met with people many times who I've had pretty big arguments with on Twitter, and we get along fine.
Yeah.
And I think
It
the
seems so
the
2017 to be that way though. Like it feels like we should just be ourselves by now, you know?
yeah.
Like But in any event, speaking of being ourselves, there's someone being herself, Chrystia Freeland. Now, this obviously shook the entire foundations of the government, and I want to just sort of start with what your thoughts are on how she did it. Did she have a right to do it the way that she did it, considering Trudeau basically fired her and then wanted her to fall on her sword anyways by delivering the budget speech? What are your thoughts on what she did, and how you think if it will result in finally for a lot of people the resignation of our prime minister?
I think it's one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen in politics, and I think it speaks to a bunch of things. There's the irony of Justin Trudeau probably being brought down again by one of the senior women in his midst in his cabinet because of something he did. He talks a very good game about being a feminist, and I think that's important. But man, you got to practice what you preach, and for him to be at a dinner in Ottawa last week talking about how his government was still an ally of feminists and how the U.S. election had been bad for women, while he was planning to fire his finance minister who had been loyal to him from day one and replace her with probably Mark Carney. The disconnect there is just it's 10 miles wide. And Chrystia Freeland, I think, decided, no, buddy, you're not going to finish me off. I'm going to finish you off. And weirdly, his staff gave her time to write this letter. It's probably the most devastatingly effective letter in Canadian political history. With very few words, said so much. And I do think that he hasn't resigned yet. Apparently, he's thinking about it, but he can't go on like this. When his closest ally, when his finance minister, not only resigns but comes out and says, basically, he's the problem. He's the one pushing these political gimmicks on people, and what Canadians need is a serious government taking problems seriously. I don't know how you recover from that.
Yeah, that was the line, wasn't it? The political gimmicks. And I couldn't tell if she was talking about the rebate or the cut to the GST, but they both felt pretty gimmicky. And you know what? They also felt like conservative gimmicks.
I
Like
mean, what
I could.
one of them
Go
was
ahead.
Aaron O'Toole's idea, the GST holiday, and
And the other one was Doug Ford's idea.
Doug
Let's
Ford's idea.
send
Yeah.
checks to people, or even Danielle Smith has done that in the past, or maybe it was Jason Kenney. But like, there's and it's really interesting to see how Trudeau has really pivoted, and I don't even think to the center, center right almost, in various um, in regards to various issues lately. Immigration being the one that I can think of the most. There is a reckoning period that we're in the middle of, aren't we? Because like when he's reversing his um one of his centerpiece platform positions, which was immigration, which is basically a mea culpa. It's not working. We thought having record number of new immigrants would be amazing for the economy, and it turned out it was kind of the opposite. And it impacted our housing in a negative way, and all this stuff. Do you think? I have a couple of questions. I want to circle back to the Trudeau Freeland thing for a second, but I just want to, just because we're there for a second, is there an ability now for maybe the next liberal leader to understand that you don't need record immigration, or you don't need um, really serious, carbon tax initiatives in order to really care about immigration and carbon taxes? Like they're like immigration numbers now are only a small percentage higher than what Max Bernier proposed last year.
Hmm.
So, do you think that maybe we can stop this? Oh, you're a commie or you're a fascist when you want certain issues to be trimmed. I know I'm word salading this question, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I wish that we could get to the point where we weren't calling people communists or fascists and actually we're willing to discuss the substance of the issue. I think the big problem for liberals right now and what they're going to need to figure out, whether it's in the leadership race that feels like it's right around the corner or after the next election, is what do they stand for? Who are they? Because it was very clear when he came into office what they stood for, who they were, what they believed in, and he's kind of backed down on almost every single key issue that defined them. You look at democratic reform, electoral reform. They bailed on that one early. They bailed on the carbon tax when they did the carve out for home heating oil. That was the end of the carbon tax. I said that at the time. It was just a matter of everyone realizing it. And then they backed down on immigration and sort of the importance, and it is still important of being able to bring in people to this country and help us grow our economy, help keep the workforce strong. We have an aging population that has all sorts of negative ramifications for healthcare spending, for the tax base. We need immigration and we need a culture and a country that welcomes it. And they probably did more to damage the consensus around immigration than any conservative could have ever done. Just by letting the numbers get out of control, letting the housing market really get juiced up by it, and sort of handing this win over to the folks who for a long time have wanted to reduce immigration numbers. So the problem for me, as someone who generally inclines towards liberalism, is I don't know what they stand for right
Yeah.
now. And I know exactly what Pierre Poilievre stands for. And look, there's a lot of it that I don't like, but there's a lot of it you got to tip your hat to. The guy has a clear message. He has a clear value proposition. And Canadians, I think, more than anything, want something different. And he is giving them that.
And he's learning as well, that you can be an effective orator without having to go to the dungeon to find your words. Like he
Yeah.
stood up in the House in the last few days, and I mean, I'm sorry, he's made remarkable speeches, and it doesn't feel divisive. It doesn't feel, and listen, this could be a lot of theater, and that's fine, but better the theater that you can stomach than the theater you can't, I think. Um,
I
when it
just
comes
just
to
just to tie a bow around Polyev, there was a
Yeah,
really good profile written by Shannon Proudfoot at Maclean's back when Maclean's was still doing good political work, and she had this sort of observation where she said there's two versions of the guy. There's the smarmy prick, who just loves to get into it with people and can be really kind of abrasive. And there's the really like thoughtful, smart, uh, intelligent guy who knows like a lot about parliamentary history. He knows a lot about the issues. And she saw that when the cameras were off, and her conclusion was it seems like he's chosen the smarmy guy. but the other guy's still in there. And I do wonder if maybe that's what his team is trying to do, is kind of tease out a little bit more of the serious, thoughtful, less abrasive Poilievre. And if they can do that, I kind of think that the world is going to be his oyster for the next little while.
There's a lot of conventional wisdom flying around these days, especially regarding what the liberal chances are if and when Trudeau steps down, or is when if an election happens after a non-confidence vote. I know that the New Democrats would rather not have an election yet, and I know the Conservatives want one yesterday. I've been listening to, I have a political strategist source in Ontario that works mostly with the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party. And he told me about a year ago that Trudeau resigning, one thing that could explain the delay, and I think we talked about this briefly the last time you were here, is that viable candidates don't want to put their name in the hat of an election that they don't think is winnable. They don't want to be one and done. And I'm starting to think that that conventional wisdom might not be relevant anymore. I think that might be expired. Not because I think they'll win. I think no matter who they'll put up, they'll lose. But I don't think that you need to be one and done anymore. So Chrystia Freeland, Mark Carney, those are the two household names. I saw you post something the other day, and I actually went and posted the same thing after I saw yours because I thought it was really effective. Nathaniel Erskine Smith, there is something about him, and I, full disclosure, I sort of know him personally because I volunteered to run a liberal campaign when he was still vying to be the candidate, and so we got to know each other a little bit after he won and everything. So he was my riding's MP. He's voted against his own government dozens and dozens of times. Um,
Mm-hmm.
he's kind of like the most polite maverick ever. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't seem to have an attitude. He gets along with people really well. I'm not saying he's perfect, but I posted something. I'll just paraphrase myself. What a way for the liberals to understand, to tell Canadians that they can read the room. Putting a guy in there that was a thorn in the side of their own party, to usher them into the next election, which they will probably be soundly defeated, but at least they'll show Canadians that they know how to read the room. And I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
I think Nate is a major political talent. I don't know where his French is at, and that is always, one of those things that you have to be bilingual, especially as a liberal, to be the leader, and maybe he's working on that. But his ability to communicate ideas, to communicate politics, is better than almost anyone in that caucus, including the prime minister, because Justin Trudeau is very much a man of 2014, 2015. The media and the social media environment of that time, and it's a different world right now. And I think we've seen that with Poilievre, where he makes these videos, he does these, these quick hits, and they're annoying as hell sometimes. They're weird, they're filled with lies, whatever they might be, but they understand the game that is being played right now. And I think Nate is the only guy I've seen in the Liberals, maybe Sean Fraser, although he's stepped away now, so he's gone, that understands the assignment in 2024, 2025. And that's what the party needs. They need someone who understands the assignment. It's not good enough to just implement policies and trust that the mainstream media is going to explain it to people for you. You actually have to do the work of sort of breadcrumbing people, getting them ready to understand an issue, sort of lead them up to the line where you need them to start walking. And liberals haven't done that. They didn't do it on the carbon tax. They haven't done it on a bunch of issues, and that's why they keep getting their ass handed to them by a conservative leader who is good at communicating in the style that most people prefer, or the way that most people receive information in 2024.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I think having someone like Nate as the next leader would be disarming for the Conservatives, because they wouldn't be able to tie him to all the policies, because that you just mentioned, because he was the biggest critic of his own
Mhm.
government when those things fell. Okay, let's turn now to more Poilievre stuff. So you wrote this recently. The headline is Pierre Poilievre is setting himself up to fail. And I'm just going to read, I love this excerpt. The greatest happiness, Genghis Khan famously said, is to scatter your enemy, to drive him before you, to see his cities reduced to ashes, and to see those who love him shrouded in tears. That's something Conservative Party of Canada Pierre Poilievre must be feeling deeply right now. With a seemingly insurmountable lead in the polls and the Liberal government collapsing before his very eyes, he's on the verge of getting everything he's ever wanted in politics, and then some. But there's another piece of Khan's wisdom that Poilievre may be about to learn. Conquering the world on horseback is easy, he said. It is dismounting and governing that is hard. That's especially true when you spent the last 2 years, as Poilievre has, raising the expectations of your closest supporters. It's one thing to promise that you'll axe the tax, fix the budget, build the homes, and stop the crime, but it's quite another to actually do it. You went on to sort of talk about how he's relating certain decisions that the Liberal government made to, say, for example, high grocery prices, when there's not a linear actual reason for that to be factual. Can you go on and sort of like expand on the idea of Pierre Poilievre being sort of in the right place at the right time? His political fortunes might be met, and then some, like you said, but that maybe he's not the hero that maybe he'd like us to think he is.
I think Polyev is very skilled at identifying problems, at um, drawing a very clear line between problems to potential solutions, even ones that aren't solutions. You know, the research that has come out from a couple of economists at the University of Calgary just recently shows that the carbon tax has almost no impact on grocery prices, and you can see that because grocery prices are just as big of an issue in America, and Donald Trump just came out and said, well, I don't think I can actually bring them down. I know I promised I would, but they're really
Yeah.
sticky and I can't bring them down. So I think the things that are helping him succeed, the things that are getting people angry, the things, the simple slogans that are really riling people up are going to prime those people to be disappointed when he can't deliver, and he can't deliver. He will not be able to, with the stroke of a federal pen, stop the crime. He will not, with the stroke of a federal pen, be able to build the housing, especially when, and I say this as someone living in Calgary, all of the opposition in this country to density, to home building, is coming from conservatives. It's coming from conservative councillors at the local level. It's coming from conservative members of his own caucus in some cases. And he is just not going to be able to square that circle in anything close to the amount of time that people expect him to. So I'm not saying that, he's going to have a collapse in his popularity like we saw with the Labour Party and Keir Starmer in the UK. But I do think, if and when he wins that majority, the honeymoon's going to be pretty damn short,
Yeah.
because people are going to want, they're going to expect him to axe the tax. He will. Nothing will happen. Gas will get a little cheaper. If you're in the bottom 20% of income earners, you'll actually lose money because the rebate was bigger than what you were paying. Great for rich people, not so great for everyone else. And then what? Right? We're not going to see this like overnight change in prices because that's just not how anything works. And I do think then people will go, well, wait a minute, you told us you were going to fix everything and nothing's fixed. And then they'll move on to the next person.
Not to sound like a socialist, but wasn't the reason for high grocery prices is simply another case of disaster capitalism? Like, they made record profits and prices have gone up 20%. Well, isn't that's pretty linear, isn't it?
So it's funny. I push back against the carbon tax argument. I kind of push back against this one too. There's definitely been some, at the height of the pandemic, some gouging, let's say, by some of the grocery companies, because it is an oligopoly in our country, and they have certain pricing power. But a lot of I've gone deep into their annual reports, looking at like actual profit margins over the years, and a big part of it is, especially for Loblaws, they bought Shoppers, and Shoppers always had bigger margins because they sell things like, makeup and home furnishings, and just things like that naturally have fatter margins than carrots or rice or chicken. So, I think there is some amount of behavior by the corporations that is driving up prices. The big part of it is supply chains and climate change. And I know people don't want to hear that, or some people don't want to hear that. But look, if you want to understand why olive oil used to cost $9 and now it costs $18 to $20, it's because there's a big drought in all the parts of Europe where they grow olives. Like, climate change is going to be the thing that makes our groceries go higher going forward, and it has been for a while now. And it's just ironic that you know we're getting rid of the Pierre Poilievre wants to get rid of the policy that would actually do something about that. Not certainly wouldn't solve climate change. It wouldn't make olive oil prices go down. But he's kind of making hay on ignoring the problem rather than addressing it.
Yeah, it's a tough issue. The real estate has always been something that has bothered many of us. It seems to be the only market that doesn't seem to follow any rational principles of inflationary rates or what have you. Like the idea that an industry completely run by banks is somehow the most valuable is totally shocking. So I don't know what anyone could do about the housing crisis. I mean, I live in an area there's 800 people in my little town. I live in the Ottawa Valley, but on the very east end in this place called the Madawaska Valley. And after the pandemic, people's rent became almost Torontofied, up
Hmm.
here. And I live like 2 hours away from Ottawa, 4 hours away from Toronto in the middle of nowhere. I don't know why the rent is so high. The supply and demand argument doesn't seem to um, satisfy people like myself or other people who are maybe possibly low income with kids. It's just really difficult, and I have no idea how you fix that. But um, what I would like to know from you, though, is the idea that Polyev still hasn't got his security clearance, um, kind of being pushed back to the back burner of news right now because of what's happening with the Liberals. Do you foresee, or do you think we would already know if there was something really that damning in the NC Cop report, which I believe has been or is about to be submitted and then released, I think, on January 31st?
Yeah, like I'm the kind of person who always kind of uh, discounts these sorts of rumors or theories, and so I've heard the argument that there's something terrible in there, and that's why Doug Ford is behaving the way he is, and he's positioning himself to take over as leader. And honestly, I just don't buy it. I think it's absolutely the case that the Indian government interfered on behalf of Pierre Poilievre in some aspects of the leadership race with Patrick Brown. I don't think there's any question about that. I also don't think that it had a material impact on the outcome. I think he was going to win anyways. His organization was so much
Is that the
stronger.
litmus test, though? Sorry
Well,
to cut you
it
off, but
yeah, no, I mean that's fair. I don't think that a revelation that there was involvement. We don't know the extent to which it turned the tide. In any ways, he's still the leader. I think the people who already dislike Pierre are going to continue to dislike Pierre and dislike him for that reason. I think by and large, most conservative voters will go, "It's just politics." I mean, look at all of the things that Trump did. I mean, Trump's resume, his misdeeds are so well documented. Court cases and um, uh, long journalistic reports over many many years documenting all the terrible, shitty things he's done, the disloyal things, the potentially treasonous things he's done. And most Americans looked at it and said, "I don't care. I want cheaper eggs." And he won the election. And I just don't think that it would be any different in Canada. I think a lot of people will go, well, maybe there was some shenanigans there, but this guy's promising to cut my taxes. He's promising to, improve the economy, and to me, that's more important. I just don't think that there's anything out there. There's this famous quote from I think he was a Louisiana congressman back in the '80s, but he said the only thing that could defeat him was getting caught with a live boy or a dead girl. And I kind of think that's where we're at with the conservatives right now. There's nothing that's going to be out there that's going to trip him up. Nothing about his wife's family. I've heard that rumor too. Nothing about his interactions with the Indian government. It's just I don't think there's a there. And I think people who are holding on to that, I understand wanting to hope that there's something else out there, but I just don't see it.
what does that say about our politics? Because I don't think that that same type of flexibility, um, is given to non-conservative leaders. I mean, like you could say that Trudeau's a little bit of a Teflon PM because of past, SNC Lavalin and because the Aga Khan situation and whatever on blackface and of
I
course
mean, he skated on
and
blackface, right?
like that was
That's
the
not
weirdest
nothing.
one. And it's so funny that when I see liberals getting really upset if conservatives bring it up. I just feel like you would bring it up for the rest of your known life if Pierre
100%.
Poilievre blackface photos emerged. It would be your profile picture. It would cut
Oh yeah.
So I don't really think it's unfair. And by the way, he survived it. And I think that is really like the idea that we give so much latitude to our politicians now. But I think that when we used to give them to the left wing politicians, if you want to generalize like that, now we're giving them to conservatives. Eventually, we're just going to not care what anyone does. And is that going to be better or worse for our politics? Because I can't tell.
I could go both ways on it. I think there was a point there a few years back where candidates were getting canceled. They were getting pulled. They were getting replaced for saying things on social media like 10 years ago, and I thought that was ridiculous. There's like I don't know, it's probably not funny to the guy it happened to, but there was a NDP candidate in Kamloops, so they were never going to win there federally. But he had a few years earlier on Facebook said he wanted to break my jaw because we disagreed about TMX. And so I just jokingly, when he was announced as the nominee, I said, "Oh, if anyone wants any Oppo research, I got something for you." And the fucking NDP actually like did their due diligence and they disqualified him for it. It was just, and I said, I think a reporter asked me at the time, I was like, absolutely not. Do not disqualify him. The guy apologized for it. People say things in the heat of an argument, and uh, we shouldn't need to have elected officials that have never said an interesting thing in their life. It's just it's not a reasonable expectation. So I'm kind of glad that we're getting to the point where people aren't so easily disqualified. It's a bigger contest than that. But there are some downsides that, as we saw in the United States, that can go too far. There are some people who should be disqualified. But I'm glad that the bar there is getting a little less sort of hysterically low.
Who do you think is better suited to make deals with Donald Trump? Pierre Poilievre or Justin Trudeau?
I hate to say it, but I think it's Doug Ford. Um,
I was
you
going
know,
to say Doug
I
Ford too, but you already gave me your opinion on whether or not he's going
yeah.
to be.
Well, look, I think even as Premier of Ontario,
Fair enough.
I think there's a part of Trump that respects Trudeau just because they come from the same world. They're both famous. They're both, he knew his dad. He beats him up and makes fun of him. But I do think there's like this weird sort of locker room respect that he might have for Trudeau. I do not think he will have any respect for Pierre Poilievre. Like Donald Trump is a textbook bully. And I think he's going to look at Poilievre and see a guy that he can knock around. And Poilievre doesn't, he doesn't really have much practice playing the tough guy. I mean, he plays the tough guy, but in actually sort of getting in that kind of a environment with a guy like Trump and standing up to him, I don't know. I don't like his odds. I don't like Trudeau's odds. I mean, I think we're clearly seeing what that looks like right now. I don't particularly like anyone's odds. He's in his
Doug
second
Ford as
term.
like a special envoy would be an interesting strategy.
It would Doug has Ford has a plain spokenness that I think Trump would appreciate. He has a business mindedness. As a former, I say entrepreneur, but his dad gave him a company. But he's still, Donald Trump's dad gave him a company, so they could bond over that. They just have a lot in common where they could probably cut through some of the noise and work a deal that was not totally damaging to Canada's economic interests.
I still can't figure out, and I don't know if anyone can. First of all, it's pretty unprecedented to have a president-elect doing so much diplomacy before inauguration day. I don't think I've ever seen this before, but it's Trump, so nothing surprises you. The idea, though, that a 20% across the board tariff, while we should take it seriously, there's got to be somebody in his administration that's like, this is like cutting your nose off to spite your face. Like, you really shouldn't do this. Like, do you feel like, and first of all, is it even predictable? Like, how do you predict anything Trump related? I don't know. But do you think that it's a lot of like bullshit in order to get us to sort of be on our heels from the beginning? Or do you think that he would actually tank both of our economies by doing that?
No, it's bullshit. We're falling for it, and that's sort of one of the embarrassing parts about this. He cares about nothing more than the stock market, right? The stock market for him is the ultimate scoreboard of his success, and he talks about it all the time, and did when he was president. And if he actually went through with a 25% across the board tariff, the stock market would tank. Like it would be a bloodbath, and he would not abide that. In a weird way, Trump um, loves to play tough, but he actually wants to be loved. He wants people to like him. And so this is sort of textbook negotiating. He's laid it all out in the books that people wrote for him, that he sets his opening offer way out here. It's the sort of Overton window in action. He gets people to freak out. He gets their expectations sort of disjointed. And then he cuts a deal that's much closer to what they would have agreed to it anyways, but it makes it seem like he has come down. He's compromised. He's a good, he's a very kind and benevolent person for doing this. What a great, moderating president. What a deal maker. And that's just the playbook. We should know that by now. We dealt with this for 4 years. And it's it's especially weird that you have, the premier of my province falling over herself to humor him and say, "Oh yeah, you're totally right about the border, and we're totally right about everything. And gosh, we would never put tariffs on you." That's what he wants, right? Just be quiet. Don't say anything. Say, "Well, we'll represent our Canada's interest to the best of our abilities," and just wait until he's in office, because
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
all theater.
the Doug Ford threat of halting energy to places like Michigan and Wisconsin or wherever, I thought was probably it was interesting because he's kind of fighting fire with fire. So, like you said, they're cut from the same cloth in a way. But doesn't Danielle Smith and Scott Moe hold more leverage with the amount of energy that we send down to the United States, which I think is 40%? It's like 2.3, what is it, 4.3 million barrels per day or something like that. I mean, and the bulk of that is coming from Saskatchewan and Alberta. They hold more sway and leverage over these Trump tariffs than Doug Ford or Pierre Poilievre if he becomes our prime minister. No.
It's only leverage if you're willing to use it, right?
Mm.
You have to have a credible threat uh, of doing the thing if you want to use the thing as leverage. And both Scott Moe and Danielle Smith have come out and said publicly, we would never do this. We would never cut off energy supplies to the United States. So the Americans know that there's no bluff there. And I think that that there's an embarrassing factor there. That they should know better than to take their own leverage off the table. But I think they also understand on some level, even if they're not going to acknowledge it, Trump might be crazy enough if we played that card, right, to say, well, Canada clearly can't be relied upon. They are a threat. And so we're going to develop our own oil and gas resources even more aggressively. We're going to subsidize all of these refineries in the Midwest that currently process Canadian oil, and we're going to make it so that within 3 years they only process American oil. And it would cost the Americans a fair bit of money, but it would completely screw Canada over, right? We have nowhere else to send that oil. We have TMX, which, thank you, Justin Trudeau, but it only has, I think 890,000 barrels per day of capacity. So if the American market closed to Canadian exports within, call it 4 years, that's a disaster. And maybe they're getting advice that suggests, like, do not even come close to touching that stove element, because you might burn your hand really, really badly.
Is nationalizing your refineries the same as Iran nationalizing their oil companies in the 50s? Like,
Well, they
it just,
wouldn't they wouldn't nationalize. What they would do is they would just say to the companies, "Here's a big bag of cash. Here's, billions of dollars in federal money. Please update your refineries so that they can process more light oil." And if the bag was big enough, they'd do it, right? Um, there's always enough subsidies to make anything happen as long as the government's willing to fund it. So I think a rational president would never do that. But Trump is not rational, right? And he's very invested in the idea of America being, quote unquote, energy dominant. And what could be more dominant than pushing Canadian oil, back across the border and replacing it with your own oil?
Max Fawcett, thank you, man, for joining us. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, happy to do it.
All right, thank you, and come back soon because I want to know whatever's gonna happen by the end of January or beginning of February. I need you back to explain it to us because most of us are thinking that we live in a simulation at this point. So,
Well, I am
thanks again. Appreciate it.
happy to offer whatever insight I can.
All right, Max Fawcett, everybody. I like having him on because he understands exactly what is going on in our country today, which, by the way, is crazy town. I have no idea how to explain what's going on in our country today. And but what we are going to try to do, myself and David Wallace, is we are creating a 5 episode podcast series that deals entirely with foreign interference. And they're going to be stories that you've heard before and stories that you haven't heard before. And we're not doing it live. We're pre-producing it. It's going to It's going to be pretty dope. We've already put a couple in the tank, and I can't wait for that to come out. We're not going to announce a date yet because there's might be one story or two that are still unfolding. But in any event, we will do our best to get that to you as soon as possible. And we'll see you next time on Black Bolt.
Black Bolt. Black Bolt.